Florence Villeminot has joined us in the studio as well. She's been ploughing through the world newspapers.
Hey,
Flo, a lot of focus on instability in eastern Ukraine, and on Wednesday, Ukrainian troops withdrew from the embattled strategic railway hub of Debaltseve.
That's right, and as you can imagine, that's getting a lot of attention in Ukraine. I pulled out, first of all, the front page of Kiev Post, a Ukrainian paper, which talks about how coming out of the Debaltseve hell, well, troops are back in the trenches. And on the front page, you can see there, it says, after the Debaltseve defeat, what is next? Specifically, what is on Russia's hit list? What is next? And inside, the Kiev Post examines potential Ukrainian-held targets for attack by Russian forces and their proxies. Those are the words of the Kiev Post. And actually, you can see that map there takes a look at just what these targets could be. They're orange exclamation points. I don't know if you can see them there on the front page, but some of these potential targets are, for instance, the strategic port city of Mariupol. And you can see that some of them are really well on the other side of the demarcation line that was put in place by that Minsk agreement.
Many papers, meanwhile, are reporting about fears coming out of the UK that Russian aggression could actually spread.
That's right. You can read about it in several papers. I pulled out, first of all, an article in Die Welt, the German press, which is interested in this. You can see they talk about danger to the Baltics. Now, these are comments that the UK Defense Secretary, Michael Fallon, made on Wednesday. He sounded the alarm when he was talking to journalists and said, "I'm worried about Putin. Russia poses a clear danger to Baltic States, so Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. These countries were once part of the Soviet Union." Now, he says that Russia is actually likely to use tactics very similar to those that were used in Crimea, covert tactics. And to quote him, he said that NATO must be prepared for aggression from Russia in whatever form it takes. Now, The Independent has a very interesting article today reporting from Riga, the capital of Latvia, where locals say they do fear that they could be next on the Kremlin's hit list, the firing line, next in the firing line. Those are the words used in The Independent. And the article points out that Russian warships and jets have approached the Baltic borders ever since the Ukrainian crisis began.
Now, this all comes as the Royal Air Force jets on Wednesday, they scrambled to intercept Russian bombers off the coast of Cornwall.
That's right, those Russian bear bombers, as they're called. They didn't actually enter British airspace, but it was definitely a wake-up call. It's getting a lot of attention in the British press. If we take a look at the front page of The Independent, it talks about how Moscow and NATO are on a collision course, so quite alarming there. And then a cartoon as well inside The Independent pokes fun, I guess, at this pretty alarming situation. You can see a weatherman there talking about a cold front that's coming on the British Isles, and that cold front looks a lot like Vladimir Putin.
Nice picture there. Let's move on to another top story as papers are continuing to focus on the attack by the Egyptian Air Force on the Islamic State group.
That's right. It's been a big story all week. We've seen a lot of Western papers quite critical of that unilateral attack by Egypt. But I pulled out an article, the editorial actually, from the New York Times, which is a little bit more nuanced. It says that Egypt is understandably very concerned about an extremist threat coming from the Islamic State group, and the Egyptian government has the right to protect its citizens, but it doesn't seem like the president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, has really thought things through, according to the New York Times. It says that Egypt cannot really afford to get bogged down in a war with Libya, and it points out that rather than fueling divisions, the president should reinforce a UN initiative, which is to create a stable government in Libya that would fight against the Islamic State group. But it's interesting because other papers in the region, Sharq al-Awsat, that's a pan-Arab paper based in London actually, it's actually very supportive of Egypt's attack on Libya. It says that diplomacy is not enough. Egypt has to fight the Islamic State group to guarantee its own security.
All right, let's have a quick word on American politics, because this week U.S. presidential hopeful Jeb Bush gave his first major foreign policy speech in Chicago. How did he do?
Well, it really depends on who you ask, as you can imagine. Now, Jeb Bush really tried to differentiate himself from his father and his brother, former presidents of the United States. He said he would be his own man. You can read about it in several publications. As you can imagine, several left-wing publications are quite critical of his speech. Here you have the Daily Daily Beast saying that he really fubbed his first big international speech. He bungled facts, pronunciation, etc. He tried to sound professional, but instead he came off sounding like a confused former governor. So pretty critical there. But interestingly enough, the editorial in The Independent, so the left-wing British paper, is quite supportive of Jeb Bush today. In their editorial, they say that actually his last name is an obstacle for him, but we shouldn't judge Jeb Bush by the presidency of his brother, George W. Bush. And actually, this editorial says that Jeb Bush is a thoughtful candidate worthy of a Republican ticket.
All right, so we'll see what happens then. And finally, Flo, a quick word on the 25th anniversary of a technological tool that's been used across the world.
That's right. Photoshop is 25 years old. Makes me feel old myself. Now, a very interesting article in the Washington Post you can check out that shows how Photoshop has changed the way we see reality, especially when it comes to physical beauty. Just to quote the article very quickly, it says, "The problem is that we much prefer manipulations of reality to reality itself."
All right, Flo, thank you very much for that. That was the international newspapers.